First reading is from St. Paul's first letter to Corinthians, chapter 13. If I speak in the tongues of men or of angels, but do not have love, I am only a resounding gong or a changing cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have a faith that can move mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor, and give over my body to hardship that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails, but where there are prophecies, they will cease. Where there are tongues, they will be stilled. Where there is knowledge, it will pass away. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part, but when completeness comes, what is in part disappears. When I was a child, I talked like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put the ways of childhood behind me. For now we see only a reflection as in a mirror. Then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. And now these three things remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. This is the word of the Lord.
Hear the gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ, according to John. Glory be to thee, O Lord. From chapter 15, beginning at verse 9. As the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Now remain in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commands and remain in his love. I have told you this so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. My command is this: love each other as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command. I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I have called you friends. For everything that I learned from my Father, I have made known to you. You did not choose me, but I chose you, and appointed you so that you might go and bear fruit, fruit that will last. And so that whatever you ask in my name, the Father will give you. This is my command: love each other. This is the gospel of the Lord. There is a child's prayer which goes, "Dear God, do you really love everybody in the whole world? Because there's only 4 in my family and I find it really hard." Loving relationships. What do we mean by this? Well, it's a community where people are committed to welcoming, serving, loving, caring for, and forgiving others. With the extra little note that growing churches also tend to have a lot of laughter in them. But what do we mean by love? We might think we know what we mean by love, but the English word love is used to translate a variety of Greek words. There is eros. The word, of course, brings out the word erotic. It's that sort of sexual love, physical love, desire. Is that what we mean by love? Well, certainly in our society, that is probably the main way that the word love is used these days. But there's also philios. And if there are any Greek scholars out there, you will recognise probably that my grammar in Greek is as bad as my grammar in French, which isn't that much better than my grammar in English. So I apologise if I get the tenses and cases slightly mixed up here. But philios, that is the love that you might have normally for one another, brotherly love. And then there is agapeos. Agapeos, or agape, you may remember we have our agape meal on Maundy Thursday. So it's another different word, completely different, but is also translated love. So when we talk of loving relationships, what are we talking about? Well, we're not talking about going around hugging and kissing each other. We're not talking about saying it would be a fantastic idea if we all paired off and had a great time. In fact, St. Paul's letters frequently suggest that that sort of love should be reserved for certain places. There's nothing wrong with the eros love, but it is for husband and wife. It is to be kept in the right place at the right time. It's a love which is a desire for something or someone. In fact, that actual word doesn't appear in the New Testament, but I'm sure the Hebrew version appears a fair bit in the Old Testament, where relationships of that kind are actually spoken about much more because there's much more history in the Old Testament. It's not that the New Testament is beyond talking about such things, but it's the style of writing that we have is not related to that aspect of love. Philadelphia, love of the brethren, philios love. That's good. That sense of being close to one another. A lot of churches feel that that's what we're talking about with loving relationships, that we can have a good time together, that people feel special, feel part of things. But actually, what we're really talking about when we think of the loving relationships is the stronger version of love. That might not immediately appear to be a picture of love, but as it's said in the Gospel, greater love has no one than this, that they lay down their lives for their friends. That is the test of love. How much are you prepared to let love cost you to show it to others? Perhaps the biggest or the clearest picture of the difference between agape love and phileo love comes in a passage which, of course, in the English, we tend to lose much of the power of. A few chapters on, towards the end of John's Gospel, where Jesus, after the resurrection, meets Peter by the lakeside. And they have their conversation. Jesus says, "Peter, do you love me?" And Peter says, "Lord, you know that I love you." But actually, it's Peter, do you agapas me? You know I philo you. And again Jesus asks, do you agapas me? And again, all Peter can say is, "You know I follow you." And the third time, Jesus asks, "Do you philais me?" A lower level. Is that as far as Peter can reach? And then we read that Peter was upset, distressed when Jesus asked him the third time. Yes, it would have had overtones of the 3 times Peter had denied him. But the third time, Jesus was implying, perhaps, that Peter could never reach that standard of agape love. And Peter again, distraught, replies, "You know I follow you." At that stage, that was the most that Peter could say. It was only after he'd received God's Spirit within him at Pentecost that he reached the point where his love for Jesus was truly agape love, and ultimately he would lay down his life for his friend. So, loving relationships. Maybe that picture or those words about loving relationships aren't the words you would immediately think of. But loving relationships is about justice, about truth, and about grace. How does that work? Well, justice. Christ showed his love for us in that he died for our justification. He gave his life to deal with the penalty, to serve the cause of justice, to show that sin needed to be dealt with. Justice is required for true loving relationships. Why? Because agape love hates injustice. Too often when we see injustice, we show a philo love. We don't like injustice. We might grumble about injustice. We might say it shouldn't happen. But agape love will do something about it. Agape love will get involved. Agape love will actively seek to change what is wrong and make things right. So there is justice in loving relationships. And there is truth in loving relationships. We are told to speak the truth in love. Now, speaking the truth is not always done in a loving way. I was reminded of one of the quotes about Winston Churchill when one Liverpool Labour politician, a lady, spoke to him, met him at a function one time and said, "Sir, you're drunk." To which he replied, "Madam, you're ugly, but in the morning I will be sober." That might have been speaking the truth. I will leave you to judge whether the lady concerned was ugly or not. You can find a picture of her on the internet. But it wasn't speaking the truth in love. But truth is important for love. We're told in that great passage in 1 Corinthians 13 that love rejoices in the truth. We don't want falsehood. We don't want lies. We don't want corruption. We want truth. We want the word of truth. We want lives that are true. Integrity. Agape love requires all of these things, and the relationships between us require all of these things. And above all these, perhaps, or linking them all together, is the need for grace. We're told that love protects, trusts, hopes, perseveres. It's not judgmental, even though it seeks for justice. It's not unpleasant, even though it seeks for truth. It wants to give. Agape love chooses to give. It's an act of the will. And it says, I'm going to love you whatever. My love does not depend on your response. That's the love of God. The love of the Father for the prodigal son. The love for the sinner. Loving relationships carry on loving, whatever the cost. And that takes grace. Not seeking revenge, not taking offence, but giving all the time. Do we find those loving relationships among us? Are we prepared to work for justice? To have such a love for our community, a love for one another, a love for our world, that we will actively do something about what is wrong? Do we love with truth that is prepared to stand up and say, well, actually, this is right and this isn't? This is your gift that we want you to use, and actually that isn't. Do we show a love that is gracious, that will give love whatever the response, that will love those who hurt us, that will love those who we actually find quite unpleasant at times? We're not told that we have to like everybody and everything, but we're called to love, and that takes grace. And a place where you find relationships of love like that is a place that is attractive, magnetic. It's a place that draws people in. And the trouble with relationships is that as soon as you draw people in, that network of relationships changes, expands, and we have to start loving all over again. And so loving relationships are never static. They're always ready to change. So going back to that definition, perhaps we can see it a bit more clearly now. Loving relationships are a community, one together, not lots of individuals, but recognizing that we are one, where people are committed, where we're involved, determined, committed to welcoming. The doors are open. The arms of love are open. Committed to serving, looking out for the needs of others and doing what we can to meet them. Committed to loving in all its forms. Committed to caring for and forgiving, even though we don't feel like it, even though we're hurt, even though we may feel that it's too much and they don't deserve it. And when you get love like that, then there's going to be a lot of joy and a lot of laughter, because everyone will know that they're special, that they're important, that they're valued. And people will be relaxed and able to feel the real joy of the Lord bubbling in them and surrounding them. Jesus said, "As the Father has loved me, so have I loved you." That is the pattern for our loving relationships. The love we find in Christ. The love that took him to the cross. This is my command: love each other. Not his suggestion, not his ideal, but his command. Because that sort of love never fades, never fails. It's eternal. These three remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love.